Have you ever looked at a movement, something that started with so much hope and unity, and wondered, what happened? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're diving into a personal essay that grapples with a really perplexing question. How did a community of yogis and spiritual seekers, people who were all about peace, seemingly pivot to what the author calls a new era of division and hate? Okay, let's get into it.
So, the author's story starts by connecting two big cultural moments, or sparks. First, you've got the love generation back in the 60s. Peace, anti-war protests, a deep dive into Eastern mysticism. Then, flash forward 60 years, and we have what they call today's conscious revolution, which is all about yoga, wellness, and sustainability. The whole idea here is that these two movements on the surface look a lot alike, both aiming for a better world.
And this leads to the million-dollar question, right? What went wrong? How could this new age of awakening, which seemed to have so much promise, get so sidetracked? The author is basically asking how a movement that was all about oneness got tangled up, in their view, with these powerful forces of division and fear.
All right, so here's our game plan for breaking down the author's argument. We'll start with that tale of two sparks, then we'll look at the spiritual to political shift. After that, we'll dissect the anatomy of a conspiracy, think about a pretty serious warning from history, and wrap it all up with the author's plea for unity.
So let's kick things off with part one, a tale of two sparks. The entire argument really hangs on this fascinating and maybe kind of worrying question. Could these two very different eras of awakening actually be heading for the same disappointing fate?
The essay really paints a vivid picture of that first spark, the love generation. I mean, this was a massive cultural shift. You had young people pushing back hard against injustice and war. They were exploring higher consciousness, getting into Eastern philosophy and shamanism. It was this huge wave of environmentalists and free thinkers. The author says the momentum was just incredible. But here's the thing, that original spark, according to the essay, eventually burned out. The energy just faded. And now, 6 decades down the road, it seems like a new one is flickering to life. This conscious revolution built around caring for the planet and a more universal kind of spirituality. It really felt like we were getting a second chance.
Which brings us right to section 2, and really the puzzle at the heart of the author's whole piece, this shocking spiritual to political shift. They describe watching people in their own community go from being passionate Bernie followers to die-hard Trump supporters. That's a huge leap.
The author maps out this really wild journey they witnessed. Before 2016, they say their friends were all in on progressive ideas. Then, after 2016, this belief in a deep state conspiracy starts to take hold, but they were still kind of leaning left. But then, sometime between 2016 and 2020, boom, a total switch flips, a full-on embrace of Trumpism and an America First ideology. So the real question is, what on earth could have caused that final dramatic pivot? And according to the essay, this wasn't just some small political disagreement. It was what they saw as a complete reversal of their community's core values. A group that once championed love and acceptance supposedly adopted stances that were anti-Muslim, anti-LGBTQ rights, anti-equality, and all in for nationalism. A total 180 from where they began. So how in the world does that happen? Well, moving into our third section, the essay points a finger at one main driver for this whole transformation, the QAnon conspiracy theory. The argument is that this narrative was the bridge, the pathway that made such a massive ideological jump even possible. So, what is QAnon? At least according to this source material. Well, it's defined as a pro-Trump conspiracy theory. And its central belief is that Donald Trump is secretly fighting a war against a global cabal of Satan-worshipping elites who are trafficking and abusing children. This is the core idea that the essay really zeroes in on. And the author makes a really crucial point here about why this narrative was apparently so effective. The argument is that by focusing on an issue as universally horrifying as child abuse, using hashtags like #SaveTheChildren, the movement was able to pull on people's heartstrings and manipulate their emotions to draw them in, no matter what their politics were before. The essay then suggests that some of the core ingredients of this conspiracy are actually pulled straight from fiction. For instance, take this thing called adrenochrome. Theorists believe it's a chemical that elites harvest from the blood of tortured children. But the author points out this isn't a real thing. It's a fictional drug that Hunter S. Thompson made up for his book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This idea of borrowing from pop culture is a huge part of the essay's argument. The author draws this really fascinating parallel to the movie V for Vendetta. Think about it. A fractured America after a pandemic, a fight against a shadowy cabal, and a movement led by a mysterious anonymous figure. The implication here is that the QAnon story wasn't some organic revelation, but a narrative that was stitched together from plots we've all seen in Hollywood.
Okay, so this is where things get really intense. We're now at the most provocative part of the author's argument. In Section 4, they lay out what they see as a really stark warning from history, drawing a parallel that is, frankly, extremely controversial. The author directly compares the propaganda tactics they see today with those from 1930s Germany. They point to specific things, blaming an other, in one case the Jews, in another, liberals and immigrants. They highlight the accusation of being Satan-worshipping pedophiles. They point to the slogan, "To make the country great again." And finally, they note how a leader is presented as the one and only savior against a hidden cabal. It's a heavy, powerful comparison, and it's absolutely central to the author's warning.
And to really hammer home how deeply a manipulated story can take hold, the essay includes this absolutely jarring statistic. The claim that even as the Third Reich was literally collapsing, about half the German population still believed Hitler had been good for the country. This is held up as the ultimate cautionary tale about the power of sustained disinformation.
So, after laying all that out, the problem, this grim historical warning, where does that leave us? This brings us to the final section, a plea for unity. And here, the essay shifts from diagnosing the problem to proposing what the author sees as the antidote. At the very heart of this plea is a really important distinction the author makes between religion and spirituality. The essay argues that religion, with its dogma and its claims to be the one true way, can often divide and conquer. True spirituality, on the other hand, is presented as something universal. It's what unites and connects us. It's what sees the oneness in everybody. And that shift in perspective is offered as the real answer. So ultimately, the author's plea isn't about politics, not really. It's not about left versus right. It's about perception. The final conclusion is that the only real way to push back against these forces of division and hate is to fundamentally change how we see the world, and more importantly, how we see each other.
And the essay closes by using this incredible quote from the astronomer Carl Sagan, which is just this powerful call for humility and perspective. When you imagine our entire world from deep space, just a pale blue dot, all our conflicts, all our divisions, they just seem so small. Our shared humanity becomes the only thing that matters. It's a final profound thought on our responsibility to each other here on the only home we've ever known.